The room was already loud before anything went wrong. Voices echoed off the padded walls. Commands snapped through the air. Bodies moved in tight formations, feet sliding, fists cutting through space with sharp exhalations. This wasn't a casual gym. This was a private training hall, controlled, exclusive, and proud of it. Every person inside carried themselves like they belonged there, like they had earned the right to stand on that floor. That's when the door opened. It wasn't dramatic, no pause, no announcement, just the quiet sound of a handle turning and a man stepping inside. He didn't look like the others, no branded gear, no tight compression shirt, no entourage. He wore simple training clothes, clean but plain, the kind that didn't try to prove anything. He stood near the entrance for a moment, taking in the room. Eyes calm, posture relaxed. He didn't interrupt. He didn't ask for attention. Most people didn't notice him at first. A few did and dismissed him just as quickly. The session continued until one voice cut through the rhythm. "Hey, you." The instructor didn't stop the drill. He didn't even turn fully at first. His tone carried confidence, the kind that expected obedience without explanation. When the movement finally paused, all eyes followed his gaze to the man by the door. "What are you doing back there?" The instructor said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "This isn't a viewing gallery." A few trainees smirked. Someone laughed under their breath. The man took a step forward unhurried. "I was told to come here," he said calmly. That was it. No challenge, no apology, just a statement. The instructor looked him up and down this time. Slowly, deliberately, like a judge inspecting a mistake. "You were told wrong," he replied. "This is advanced training, not a place for tourists." The room reacted immediately. A ripple of quiet amusement spread. Some students folded their arms. Others leaned back, already enjoying the moment. They'd seen this before. Outsiders came in all the time, curious, confident, usually humbled within minutes. But something about this felt different. The man didn't leave. He didn't argue either. "I'm here to train," he said. That was when the instructor smiled, but not kindly. "To train," he repeated louder now. "With who?" "You." More laughter. Louder this time. The instructor took a step closer, closing the distance, asserting control. "Do you even know where you are?" he continued. "People wait years to get in here, and you just walk in like you belong." The man met his eyes, no tension, no flare of pride. "Yes," he said. "That's exactly why I'm here." The laughter faded a little, not because of what he said, but how he said it. There was no bravado in his voice. No edge, just certainty. The instructor scoffed. "All right," he said, spreading his hands so the whole room could see. "Then this should be interesting." He turned back to the group, raising his voice. "Everyone take a break. Looks like we've got a volunteer." The word hung in the air. The man didn't move. He didn't correct him. He didn't explain. He simply stood there, quiet, composed, while the room slowly shifted around him. No one in that hall knew it yet. But this training session had already gone too far. And nothing that happened next would be forgotten. The facility itself was designed to intimidate before anyone ever spoke. High ceilings, perfectly aligned mats, heavy bags hanging at equal distances, not a scuff out of place. Everything about the space said discipline, but not the quiet kind. This was controlled order, the type that reminded you who was in charge the moment you stepped inside. Even the lighting felt deliberate, bright enough to expose mistakes, sharp enough to make every movement visible. This wasn't a gym people stumbled into by accident. You were invited here, selected, vetted. The walls told the story before anyone did. Framed photos of champions, newspaper clippings frozen in time, old trophies polished until they gleamed, each one a reminder that greatness had passed through this room, but only after being approved. The message was clear. Respect wasn't given here. It was earned, measured, and often withheld. The trainees reflected that culture perfectly. They moved with confidence that bordered on entitlement. Not sloppy confidence, trained confidence. The kind that comes from being told again and again that you're better than most people outside these walls. Some had talent, some had potential. A few had both. But all of them had absorbed the same lesson early on: appearance mattered. Reputation mattered. Where you came from mattered. And if you didn't fit the image, you didn't belong. That was why the man by the door stood out so sharply. Not because he looked weak. Not because he looked lost, but because he looked unaffected. While others stretched aggressively or paced with nervous energy, he remained still, observing without judgment. He didn't scan the walls like someone seeking validation. He didn't stare at the trophies. He wasn't impressed, and that alone made him an anomaly. In this place, everyone wanted something to prove. Accept him. The instructor returned to the center of the mat, arms crossed, eyes flicking briefly toward the man as if checking whether he'd taken the hint and left. He hadn't. That alone seemed to irritate him more than open defiance would have. This isn't a public dojo, the instructor said, projecting his voice again, not just toward the man but toward the room. This is where professionals train. People who've earned the right to be here. He let the silence sit, confident it would do the work for him. The trainees understood the message immediately. Some straightened their posture. Others glanced at the man, then quickly looked away, as if not wanting to be associated with whatever was about to happen. A few watched openly, curiosity mixing with quiet excitement. Moments like this broke the routine. They were entertaining. The man listened without interrupting. He didn't nod. He didn't react. The instructor continued, pacing slowly now, warming to his role. You walk into a place like this, he said. You follow protocol. You announce yourself. You show respect. You don't just stand there like you own the place. A subtle jab, carefully chosen. Still nothing from the man. That calm began to unsettle a few people in the room, not consciously, but instinctively. Silence usually meant submission or fear, but this silence felt different. It wasn't shrinking. It wasn't defensive. It was patient. The instructor mistook that patience for weakness. You see, he went on, gesturing around him, everyone here understands hierarchy. They know who teaches and who learns, who leads and who follows. His eyes locked onto the man, and right now you're neither. A low chuckle rippled through part of the group, but not all of them laughed. One trainee, a little older than the rest, frowned slightly. He'd been watching the man since he entered, not because he recognized him, but because something about his posture didn't match the situation. There was no stiffness in his shoulders, no tension in his hands. He looked like someone who had stood in many rooms like this before and had never needed permission. The instructor didn't notice. He was too busy defending the image of the room. You come dressed like that, he said. You expect people to take you seriously. That was the moment the culture of the place revealed itself fully. No one objected. No one stepped in. Not because they agreed completely, but because this was how things worked here. Authority wasn't questioned. If someone was being tested, you let it happen. If someone was being embarrassed, you assumed there was a reason. That's how the system stayed intact. The man finally moved again, just one step forward, slow and deliberate. I don't need anyone to take me seriously, he said evenly. I just need space to train. The simplicity of the statement landed harder than any insult. A few trainees shifted uncomfortably. It wasn't what they expected. There was no apology, no justification, no attempt to impress. Just a quiet request that ignored the unspoken rules of the room. The instructor's jaw tightened. This place isn't about space, he snapped. It's about standards. He paused, letting his eyes sweep the group. And standards don't bend for anyone. The man held his gaze. Then they shouldn't, he replied. That was it. No raised voice, no challenge. But something changed in the air. The instructor felt it too, even if he didn't understand it. The room, once firmly under his control, had shifted slightly. Not enough to be obvious, but enough to be dangerous. Silence spread again, thicker this time, heavier. The man hadn't broken any rules. He had simply refused to play by the unspoken ones. And in a place built on ego, that refusal was the most disruptive thing of all. Before we continue, let me ask you this at this moment. Whose side are you on? The authority of the room, or the calm of the man who refuses to bend? The instructor stepped forward as if the silence itself had challenged him. Up close, he commanded attention. Broad shoulders, sharp voice, years of authority packed into the way he stood, chin slightly raised, eyes scanning for submission. This was his floor, his room. Every rule here flowed through him first, and he expected that to be understood without explanation. He circled the man slowly, not in a tactical way, but in a theatrical one, letting everyone watch. So, he said, dragging the word out, you want to train? A pause, a faint smile that wasn't friendly. Tell me, he continued. What do you train in? The man didn't answer immediately. Not because he was intimidated, but because he was deciding whether the question deserved one. That hesitation, however brief, irritated the instructor more than a wrong answer ever could. The instructor pressed, speechless already. A few trainees laughed again, louder now, encouraged. The man finally spoke. I train. That was all. The instructor blinked once, then laughed openly, throwing his head back just enough for the room to see he was enjoying this. You hear that? He said to the group. He trains. More laughter. Someone clapped sarcastically. In what? The instructor demanded. Yoga, Tai Chi, internet videos. The man's expression didn't change. I train where discipline is taken seriously, he replied. The instructor's smile faded. You're standing in one of the most respected training facilities in this region, he said sharply. We don't play games here. People earn their place. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice just enough to feel personal, but still loud enough for others to hear. And right now you haven't earned anything. The man met his gaze, calm, steady. That's fine, he said. I'm not here to take anything. That answer landed wrong. It didn't fit the script. The instructor straightened and turned to the group again, waving a hand dismissively. This is exactly the problem, he said. People walk in here thinking humility is enough. It's not. Skill matters. Experience matters. Reputation matters. He looked back at the man, and judging by how you walked in here, you don't have much of any of that. The insult was deliberate this time. Sharp, designed to cut. The room went quiet again, but not in anticipation and discomfort. A younger trainee shifted his weight. Another glanced toward the exit. A few exchanged looks they didn't quite understand themselves. Something about the exchange was starting to feel less like instruction and more like a display. The man didn't react. No tightening of fists, no flare in his eyes. Just a slow breath in. The instructor noticed and mistook it for nerves. Let me guess, he said. You watched a few clips, read a few books, thought you'd test yourself against real fighters. He stepped closer. This isn't a place for fantasies. The man answered softly. Neither is ego. That word hit harder than a shout, ego. The instructor froze for half a second, long enough for the room to feel it. Then his face hardened. You think you're clever, he snapped. But you're out of your depth. He raised his voice again, reclaiming the room. Everyone here understands respect. You don't challenge it, you don't question it. He pointed at the man. And you don't talk back. The man didn't argue. I didn't, he said. I answered. That calm correction stripped the instructor of momentum, and he knew it. His tone sharpened. All right, he said slowly. Let's make this simple. He gestured toward the mat. If you're here to train, step forward. The challenge hung in the air. Some trainees leaned in, others tensed. This was the moment things usually escalated. Pride met pride. Someone got embarrassed. The hierarchy was restored. The man stepped forward, not aggressively, not defiantly, just forward. The instructor smiled again, but this time, it didn't reach his eyes. Good, he said. Now everyone can see what happens when confidence meets reality. He turned to the nearest trainee. Get ready, he said. We're about to demonstrate the difference between experience and imagination. A few students hesitated. Sir, one of them said quietly. Maybe. The instructor cut him off without looking. Stay out of it. That dismissal did more than silence the trainee. It signaled something else entirely. This was no longer about training. It was about control. The man noticed. So this is a lesson, he asked calmly. The instructor scoffed. For you, he replied. It's a reminder. The man nodded once. Then make it a good one, he said. The room went still. That wasn't defiance, it was permission. And in that instant, several people in the room realized the situation had shifted again, subtly, quietly, but unmistakably. The instructor had wanted to humiliate a stranger. Instead, he had stepped into something he didn't fully understand. And the lesson he was about to teach was no longer his to control. The man stepped onto the mat, and the room seemed to hold its breath. He didn't square up the way newcomers usually did. No exaggerated stance. No bouncing on the balls of his feet. He stood naturally, weight balanced, arms relaxed at his sides. Anyone watching closely would have noticed how still he was, not rigid, not frozen, just present, as if the noise around him had faded into something distant. The instructor took that stillness as hesitation. Comfortable? He asked, voice edged with mock concern. The man nodded once. Yes. That single word carried no bravado, no challenge, just certainty. The instructor rolled his shoulders, loosening up theatrically, making sure everyone could see his confidence. He paced a half circle around the man, talking as he moved. This isn't about embarrassing you, he said, though his tone suggested the opposite. It's about understanding limits. Yours. He stopped directly in front of him. When someone walks into a room like this, he continued, they need to know where they stand. The man met his eyes. I know where I stand, he said quietly. A few trainees exchanged looks. Something about that answer didn't sit right. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't arrogant. It was settled. The instructor scoffed and raised a hand, signaling for attention. Watch carefully, he told the room. This is what confidence without foundation looks like. He took a step closer, invading the man's space, waiting for a reaction. None came. No flinch, no tightening of the jaw, not even a shift in posture. The instructor frowned, irritation creeping into his expression. "You're awfully calm," he said. The man's voice remained even. "There's no reason not to be." That was when the instructor realized something wasn't going according to plan. Calm was supposed to crack under pressure. Silence was supposed to shrink when challenged. But the man wasn't shrinking. He was waiting. The instructor decided to push harder. "Let's see if that calm holds," he said, motioning for the man to take a stance. "I don't need one," the man replied. A ripple moved through the room. "What?" the instructor snapped. "I don't need a stance yet," the man repeated. "Neither do you." That stopped the instructor cold for just a moment. "Don't tell me how to train," he said sharply.
"I didn't,"
the man said. "I told you how I do." The difference mattered more than the words themselves. It reframed the entire exchange. This wasn't someone asking permission. This was someone setting a boundary quietly. The instructor laughed again, louder this time, forcing the room back into alignment. "You hear that?" he said to the trainees. "He's got his own methods." He stepped back and raised his hands, exaggerated, loose, showy. "All right," he said. "Show us." The man didn't move. Seconds passed. The instructor's smile faltered. "Any time now," he said. The man's eyes stayed on him, steady, unreadable. "I'm already showing you," he replied. That answer unsettled the room more than any strike would have. A long silence followed. The instructor shifted his weight, suddenly aware of how many eyes were on him now, not just watching, but evaluating. He felt the need to reclaim momentum, to do something, anything, that restored the familiar order. "You think standing still makes you disciplined?" he snapped. "Discipline is action." The man nodded slowly. "And restraint." The word landed heavy. Restraint wasn't celebrated here. Aggression was. Dominance was. Restraint was what you talked about later, after winning. The instructor stepped in again, closer this time, lowering his voice. "You don't belong here," he said. "And the longer you stand there pretending otherwise, the worse this gets for you." The man didn't raise his voice. "I'm not pretending," he said. "And this isn't getting worse." He paused, just long enough to let the words settle. "It's getting clearer." That did it. The instructor stepped back abruptly, jaw tight, pride stung. He turned away from the man and addressed the room again, forcing confidence back into his posture. "Everyone see this," he said. "This is what happens when someone confuses calm with control." He turned back sharply. "Control is earned," he said. "And you haven't earned a thing." The man's response was immediate, but still gentle. "Control isn't taken," he said. "It's maintained." Another silence. This one stretched longer, somewhere in the room. A trainee swallowed audibly. Another shifted his feet. The energy had changed again, not toward violence, not toward confrontation, but toward something more dangerous for the instructor. Doubt. He had expected fear, resistance, even anger. What he got instead was composure that didn't ask for approval. The instructor felt it slipping, his authority, the room, the narrative. So he did the one thing he knew always worked. He raised his voice. "Enough," he barked. "You want to train here? Then follow my rules." The man looked around the room for the first time, not at the instructor, but at the trainees. His gaze moved slowly, calmly, meeting eyes without judgment. A few looked away. A few didn't. Then he looked back at the instructor. "I'm following the only rules that matter," he said. "And those are?" the instructor demanded. The man answered without hesitation. "Respect. Awareness, control." He let the words breathe. "I haven't broken any of them." The instructor opened his mouth to respond but stopped. For the first time since the man had walked in, he wasn't sure what to say next. And in that moment of uncertainty, something quietly irreversible happened. The room no longer belonged entirely to him, not because the man had challenged him, but because he hadn't needed to. The shift didn't happen all at once. It started in small, almost invisible ways, the kind you only notice after it's already too late to stop. A trainee near the back stopped stretching and straightened up. Another lowered his arms, eyes fixed on the center of the mat. The laughter from earlier didn't return. No one seemed eager to speak anymore. The instructor felt it before he saw it. He was used to attention, used to eyes following his movements, waiting for his next command. But now the focus in the room had split. Some were still watching him out of habit. Others, quietly, instinctively, were watching the man. Not because he was doing anything, but because he wasn't. The man remained exactly where he was, posture unchanged, breathing steady. He didn't scan the room to measure reactions. He didn't look for allies. He didn't look for approval. If anything, he seemed more distant now, as if the tension around him wasn't something he needed to engage with. That distance unsettled people. A senior assistant instructor stepped closer to the edge of the mat, arms folded, brow furrowed. He'd been training here long enough to recognize patterns, and this didn't match any of them. Newcomers usually cracked by now. They argued. They explained themselves. They tried to impress. This man hadn't done any of that. The instructor cleared his throat, the sound sharper than he intended. "Is something wrong?" he asked the room, forcing a laugh. Everyone looks like they've never seen a warm-up before. No one laughed back. A few trainees exchanged glances. One looked toward the assistant instructor, as if expecting him to step in. He didn't. The silence stretched. The instructor turned back to the man, irritation flashing across his face. "You planning to say anything?" he asked. The man answered calmly, "I'm listening." That answer landed differently now. Before, it had sounded dismissive. Now it sounded deliberate. The instructor felt the need to reassert himself, not with words, but with movement. He stepped closer again, planting his feet firmly, making sure his presence filled the space. "This is how it works," he said. "When someone challenges the structure, we address it." "I didn't challenge anything," the man replied. "I showed up." A murmur passed through the room, not loud, not clear, but real. The instructor caught it. He turned sharply toward the trainees. "Is there a problem?" No one answered. A younger student shifted uncomfortably, then spoke before he could stop himself. "He hasn't done anything wrong," he said quietly. The room froze. The instructor's head snapped toward him. "Excuse me." The trainee swallowed. "I mean, he hasn't disrespected anyone. He's just standing there." The instructor stared at him, disbelief hardening into anger. "This doesn't concern you," he said. The man spoke before the trainee could respond. "It does," he said calmly. "He's part of the room." That simple defense changed everything. The instructor hadn't expected that, not the support, and certainly not the timing. He opened his mouth to shut it down, but another voice spoke up, older this time. "He's right," someone said from the side. "This feels unnecessary." Now the tension was visible. The instructor took a slow breath, nostrils flaring. He looked around and realized something he hadn't before. The room wasn't against him, but it wasn't fully with him either. The certainty he relied on had cracked, and through that crack, doubt had slipped in. He turned back to the man, lowering his voice. "You're causing disruption," he said, "whether you mean to or not." The man shook his head slightly. "No," he said, "I'm revealing it." That was the moment the assistant instructor stepped forward. "Maybe we take a pause," he suggested carefully. "Reset the session." The lead instructor stared at him. "A pause," he repeated. "For what?" The assistant chose his words with care. "For perspective." The room went quiet again. The instructor looked from the assistant to the trainees and back to the man. For the first time, his confidence wavered visibly. He was no longer directing the moment. He was reacting to it, and everyone could see it. The man didn't press the advantage, didn't speak, didn't move. He let the silence do the work. In that silence, a few uncomfortable truths surfaced. That respect couldn't be forced. That authority without composure looked fragile. That maybe, just maybe, the loudest voice in the room wasn't the strongest one. The instructor finally stepped back, creating space where he'd been trying to dominate it moments earlier. His shoulders sagged just slightly, as if the effort of maintaining control had caught up with him. "We'll continue," he said, though the words lacked conviction. But nothing continued. Because the room had changed. Whatever was about to happen next wouldn't be about drills or hierarchy anymore. It would be about recognition. About realizing who had been underestimated, and what that mistake was going to cost. Before we move on, tell me this at this point in the story. What would you do if you were standing in that room? The door opened again, this time with intention. Not a casual entry. Not someone wandering in late. The sound cut cleanly through the tension, and every head turned at once, as if the room had been trained to respond to authority on instinct. A man in a fitted blazer stepped inside, followed by a staff member holding a clipboard. He didn't look like a coach. He didn't carry himself like someone there to train. His posture was businesslike, controlled, the kind of calm that didn't need to announce itself. The assistant instructor straightened immediately. The lead instructor's face shifted too, subtle, quick, but noticeable. Relief flashed for half a second, like he'd been handed an escape route. "Director," the instructor said, forcing a confident smile. Didn't expect you today. The director didn't smile back. His eyes went straight to the center of the mat, to the man, and something about his expression changed so fast it almost didn't register. His steps slowed. His shoulders tightened, not in anger, more like recognition colliding with disbelief. The room felt it before anyone understood it. The director walked closer, not hurried, but focused. As he approached, the man finally turned his head slightly, acknowledging him with a calm nod. The director stopped 2 steps away. For a moment, he didn't speak. He looked at the man's face like he was confirming something he couldn't afford to get wrong. His lips parted, then closed again. He swallowed. Then his voice came out different than it had at the door, lower, respectful, almost careful. "Sir," he said. The lead instructor blinked, confused. The trainees leaned in without realizing they were doing it. Even the air felt quieter. The director's eyes didn't leave the man's. "Sir, I didn't know you were coming today." The man's response was calm and simple. "I didn't announce it. That should have been normal." But the director's reaction made it anything but. He nodded quickly, a small apologetic gesture, like he just realized something serious had happened under his roof. "I understand," he said. "I am sorry for what you walked into." Now the lead instructor's smile started to fade. He glanced around, looking for the joke, looking for context, looking for the moment the room returned to him. It didn't. The director turned slightly, addressing the lead instructor without fully facing him. The difference was sharp. The tone was still controlled, but now it carried weight. "What's going on?" he asked. The lead instructor chuckled nervously. "Just a small interruption. We handle things like this. You know how it is." The director's eyes narrowed. "Just a fraction." "I asked what's going on," he repeated. The lead instructor's jaw tightened. He walked in during session. He said, gesturing toward the man. "No sign in, no introduction. Claimed he was here to train. We maintain standards." The director didn't react the way the instructor expected. He didn't nod. He didn't agree. He looked at the man again, then back at the instructor. "And you thought this was the way to maintain standards?" he asked. The lead instructor frowned. "We can't let strangers." The director cut him off, calm but firm. "He's not a stranger." The room locked up. A trainee near the front stopped breathing for a second. Someone in the back whispered, barely audible,
"Wait, what?"
The lead instructor stared. "What do you mean he's not?" The director faced the man fully now, and his voice softened again, respectful in a way that didn't need permission from anyone else in the room. "Mr. Seagal," he said clearly. The name hit the room like a sudden drop in temperature. Steven Seagal. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't dramatic. It was spoken plainly. Like a fact the director assumed everyone should already understand. And that made it even worse for the instructor. The lead instructor's face drained. The way confidence leaves someone when they realize the ground beneath them was never solid. His eyes flicked from the director to the man, searching for denial. Steven didn't change his expression. He didn't smirk. He didn't look satisfied. He simply stood there, quiet as he had been the entire time. The director's tone tightened again as he turned back to the instructor. "You've been raising your voice at him," he said. The lead instructor swallowed. "I didn't know who he was." Steven spoke, still calm. "That's the point." The words weren't cruel. They weren't even loud. But they landed with authority that the instructor could never imitate. The director looked uncomfortable now, like the building itself had embarrassed him. "This facility has a code," he said to the instructor. "Respect, discipline, control." He gestured subtly toward Steven. "You've been taught those words for years, and yet, the moment you saw someone you didn't recognize, you abandoned all 3. The instructor tried to recover, voice tightening. "I was protecting the training environment." The director shook his head once. "No," he said. "You were protecting your ego." That sentence silenced the room completely. Even the trainees who had laughed earlier looked down now. Some stared at the floor. Some stared at Steven. A few looked at the instructor with something new in their eyes, disappointment. The instructor's hands flexed at his sides, not aggressive, just overwhelmed. He glanced at Steven, then away quickly, like eye contact itself had become unbearable. Steven finally moved just 1 step forward. Not threatening, not dramatic, just enough to shift the energy back into balance. He looked at the trainees, then at the instructor, then at the director. "I didn't come here to make a scene," he said. "I came because I heard this place teaches discipline." His eyes rested on the instructor for a beat. "And I wanted to see what you taught when nobody was watching." The director's face tightened. He knew what that meant. Because people had been watching. Everyone. The instructor opened his mouth, but no words came out. Steven didn't wait for them. He turned slightly, calm and deliberate, and the room instinctively made space for him, not out of fear, but out of respect that finally arrived too late. The director lowered his head, a quiet acknowledgement of fault. And the lead instructor stood frozen in the center of his own mat, realizing that the biggest lesson of the day wasn't going to be taught with strikes. It was going to be taught with consequences. The room didn't erupt after that. There was no shouting, no dramatic confrontation. No one clapped or whispered or pulled out a phone. What followed was far quieter and far heavier than anyone expected. The director spoke first, his voice low, measured. "Everyone take a break," he said. 10 minutes. No one argued. No one questioned it. The trainees stepped off the mat one by one, slower than before, heads lowered, conversations muted. Some avoided looking at the instructor. Others glanced at Steven with expressions they didn't yet have words for: confusion, respect, maybe even embarrassment. The instructor remained where he was. He looked smaller now, not physically but in presence. The authority that once filled the room had drained away, leaving behind a man forced to confront himself without the armor of volume or position. The director turned to him. "This isn't a public correction," he said quietly. "This is private. But it is serious." The instructor nodded stiffly. "I understand. Do you?" the director asked. The instructor hesitated. For the first time, there was no quick answer ready, no explanation rehearsed. Just a long pause. "I thought I was enforcing standards," he said finally. Steven spoke, not sharply, not kindly. Just honestly. "Standards aren't enforced by humiliation," he said. "They're demonstrated." The instructor's shoulders dropped a fraction. "I didn't recognize you," he admitted. Steven shook his head once. That shouldn't matter. The words weren't accusatory. They were instructional. The director let the silence sit before continuing. "You'll be stepping back from lead instruction," he said, effective immediately. The instructor closed his eyes briefly, absorbing the weight of it. When he opened them, there was no anger, only resignation. "Yes, sir," he said. "This isn't punishment," the director added. "It's correction. You'll have time to reflect. And if you return, it will be with a different approach." The instructor nodded again, this time slower. Steven didn't watch him leave. He looked at the trainees instead, those who had stayed near the edges, uncertain, processing what they'd witnessed. His gaze was steady, not judgmental. "You're here to learn," he said. "Not to feel small." A few nodded instinctively. "Strength without humility becomes noise," he continued, "and noise doesn't last." No one interrupted. No one needed to. He turned to the director. "I appreciate the apology," he said. "But this isn't about me." The director exhaled. "It won't happen again?" Steven gave a slight nod. "Good." He picked up his bag, the same simple one he'd carried in. No rush, no ceremony. As he walked toward the exit, people moved aside, not because they were told to, but because it felt right. At the door, he paused. Not for attention, for one last thought. "Remember this," he said calmly. "The loudest person in the room is often the one least in control." Then he left. The door closed behind him with the same quiet sound it had made when he entered. The room didn't return to normal after that. Training resumed later, but it was different. Voices were lower. Corrections were clearer. Instructions came without sarcasm. A few trainees trained harder, not to impress, but to focus. Others asked questions they'd been afraid to ask before. And the assistant instructor, now leading, taught with patience instead of pressure. What had happened that day spread quietly, not as gossip, as reflection. Because the lesson wasn't about fame, it wasn't about status. It wasn't even about Steven Seagal. It was about how easily power becomes cruelty when ego goes unchecked, and how true authority doesn't need to announce itself to be felt. Somewhere, the instructor began again, not on a mat, but within himself. And everyone else walked away carrying a truth that would stay with them long after the bruises faded. Respect isn't demanded. It's revealed by how you treat people when you think they don't matter. Before you go, tell us which moment in this story stayed with you the most.